Coming up on Arirang News. Before leaving for a landmark summit between the leaders of South Korea, the US, and Japan at Camp David this Friday, President Yoon says he is open to separate consultations on extended deterrence against the North. 2 buses were spotted crossing from North Korea into China. This rare move is an apparent transport of its athletes to Kazakhstan for a taekwondo tournament, but some speculate it could be a sign of its border being reopened after a years-long COVID-era closure. The death toll from the devastating Maui wildfires has risen to more than 100, but with hundreds more still missing, Hawaii's governor says the number could potentially double or triple. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with what's to be the first ever standalone three-way summit between South Korea, the US, and Japan. Ahead of Friday's meeting at Camp David, the US presidential retreat in Maryland, President Yoon says he's open to holding separate talks on extended deterrence against the North with the two countries. And reports suggest the leaders could agree to open a three-way hotline as well. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae-eun-ji starts us off.
Before leaving for a landmark summit at Camp David later this week, President Yoon said he was open to separate consultations on extended deterrence among South Korea, the US, and Japan in a written interview with Bloomberg News. It reported Wednesday that President Yoon stressed the international community will never accept North Korea as a nuclear power under any circumstances, and that he expects the summit with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and U.S. President Joe Biden will lead to an agreement on ways to enhance their capabilities to respond to nuclear and missile threats from the North. Also ahead of this week's gathering, a virtual meeting between the top diplomats of the three countries was held on Tuesday night to discuss details of the summit. Seoul's foreign ministry said Minister Park Jin and his American and Japanese counterparts, Antony Blinken and Yoshimasa Hayashi, reaffirmed their nation's strong security cooperation regarding Pyongyang's nuclear and missile threats. Following the virtual meeting, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken noted that the meeting at Camp David will mark a new era in trilateral cooperation.
And again, I don't want to get ahead of what will happen on Friday, but I think you'll see some very concrete measures that we're taking to enhance our capacity to provide for our security as three countries and also more broadly security in the Indo-Pacific region.
At the upcoming summit, the three countries are reportedly expected to launch a series of joint initiatives on defense and technology. Citing unnamed senior U.S. administration officials, Reuters said while the trilateral meeting is unlikely to produce a formal security arrangement, the leaders will agree to set up a three-way hotline to communicate in times of crisis. It also reported that the U.S. has formal collective defense arrangements in place with both South Korea and Japan separately, but it wants the two countries to work more closely together amid mounting concerns about China's growing power. In March, Seoul and Tokyo held their first bilateral summit in 12 years, as the Yoon administration has been working to restore ties with Japan by taking steps to ease tensions after years of historical disputes, including the issue of wartime forced labor during Japan's colonial rule of the Korean Peninsula, before and during World War II. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
2 buses were spotted crossing from North Korea into China. This rare move is an apparent transport of North Korean athletes to Kazakhstan for a taekwondo tournament. So could this be a sign of its border being reopened after a years-long COVID-era closure? Our North Korean affairs correspondent Lee Dae-yeon has this report.
2 buses were detected on Wednesday heading into North Korea from China and back again. Yonhap News reports that 2 buses departed Tandong at around 10:15 a.m., crossed a railway bridge over the Amnok River, and arrived in Sinuiju, North Korea. By 11:20 a.m., the buses had returned to Tandong 3 years and 7 months since the regime closed its border due to COVID-19. It's unknown who was on board, but multiple sources say it could have been athletes heading to the ITF Taekwondo World Championships taking place in Kazakhstan this week. Pyongyang earlier said that it will send about 100 athletes to the tournament. The North Korean team is expected to move to the Chinese capital city of Beijing on Wednesday and then fly to Kazakhstan after staying at the North Korean embassy. On Tuesday morning, a bus and a van were also seen in Sinuiju, crossing the border and returning to Tandong later. Sources say it was likely North Korean sailors who were arrested in China for smuggling. One expert says the resume in people exchanges had already been expected as delegations from China and Russia visited North Korea earlier to celebrate Pyongyang's Victory Day last month.
Whether or not this was related to the Taekwondo World Championships or not, more movement across the border is likely. People will be able to come and go freely in the very near future.
Some experts say there is a high possibility for a group of North Koreans who are residing in China to move back to their home country sooner. These people will likely include international students in China who haven't been able to come back to North Korea due to the pandemic. North Korea has stopped communicating with neighboring countries and closed its border in January 2020 at the start of the pandemic. But cargo train operations were spotted in January last year, and this year cargo trucks had also been spotted. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
The North Korean regime has spoken publicly about the U.S. soldier, Private Travis King, who ran across the DMZ into the north last month, saying he was seeking refuge from inhuman maltreatment and racial discrimination within the U.S. Army. Our Choi Min-jung explains what's behind the regime's intention.
North Korea has publicly shamed the United States for its human rights issues. The regime's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Wednesday that Travis King, the U.S. soldier who dashed into the north last month, admitted that he illegally crossed the border due to what he called inhuman maltreatment and racial discrimination within the U.S. Army. This is the first public acknowledgement of the incident by North Korea. The KCNA also said the soldier expressed a willingness to stay in the north or in a third country. It seems highly likely that North Korea will use this incident to criticize Washington in response to the rising international criticism of its own human rights abuses.
North Korea is showing that it's dealing with human rights issues in a very transparent manner. It is also saying that the fundamental human rights problems the U.S. and the international community are talking about lie in the U.S., not North Korea.
North Korea's public confirmation of Travis King's status also comes ahead of Thursday's UN Security Council meeting on North Korea's human rights abuses. Pyongyang has voiced strong opposition to the meeting. Meanwhile, regarding the KCNA report, the U.S. Defense Department spokesman said Washington can't verify the comments and added that the U.S. remains focused on his safe return. The U.S. soldier dashed into the north on July 18th during a civilian tour of the joint security area on the heavily fortified border between the two Koreas. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The Republic of Korea Navy is sending a ship on Wednesday to participate in the annual Pacific Partnership 2023, which is underway in waters off Vietnam beginning a week ago. According to the Navy, the same day, Korea will be joining parts of the exercise from August 21st through September 16th off the Philippines and Malaysia. This will be the first time for the nation to dispatch a naval vessel, the Cheonjabong tank landing ship, along with engineering personnel and civilian experts to enhance humanitarian support and disaster response operations, and also to introduce the excellence of Korean shipbuilding globally. Pacific Partnership is one of the largest multinational disaster relief preparedness missions hosted annually by the U.S. Pacific Fleet that initially started for damage recovery following the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004. Two FA-50GF fighter jets exported from South Korea's sole aircraft manufacturer, Korea Aerospace Industries, have successfully completed their first flights. KAI announced on Wednesday that FA-50GF number 1 and 2 took off from Minsk Air Base in Poland and flew over the country's capital, Warsaw, to commemorate National Armed Forces Day there. A total of 12 fighter jets are scheduled to be delivered by the end of the year, with FA-50GF number 3 and 4 set to be delivered sometime next month. The remaining 36 aircraft out of 48 purchased by Poland will be delivered from the latter half of 2025 through 2028. Outbound shipments of South Korea's tech sector have seen an on-year drop for 13 months in a row, mainly due to the sluggish semiconductor industry. A slowdown in the global economy is pointed out as one of the primary causes. Our An Sung-jin has the details.
South Korea's tech exports in July have seen an on-year decline for 13 consecutive months across most ICT products, including semiconductors, displays, and mobile phones. According to the Trade Ministry on Wednesday, South Korea's ICT exports for July stood at $14.6 billion, a 24.3% decrease compared to the previous year. This is largely attributed to a sluggish semiconductor industry. Semiconductor exports have seen a slump now for 12 consecutive months. The month of July saw a 33.7% on-year decrease at $7.5 billion. The relative decrease comes from a weakened demand for ICT devices.
With the decrease in demand, inventory increases, leading to a decrease in the unit prices. The slowdown in the global economy and China's economic growth are the major causes of the decrease in demand. This is expected to continue for a while as they cannot immediately change.
The base effect also played a major role as exports in July last year were at their highest for any month of July. A slowdown in the recovery also affected exports of displays and mobile phones. China takes up nearly half of South Korea's ICT exports, reaching 41.3%. Exports to China in July decreased by 27.7% on-year, while exports to Vietnam also fell by 18.6%, even though displays saw an increase. The US and Europe all saw a drop of more than 20%. Despite the overall drop in exports, the ICT industry maintained a positive trade surplus. In July, it was at $3.2 billion. As the slowdown of the economy continues, it is difficult to see when the ICT exports will bound back up again. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
China has lifted its ban on outbound group tours to South Korea for the first time in more than 6 years since Seoul's deployment of a U.S. defense system. Related industries, including tourism and retail, are busy preparing to welcome the tourists back. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young tells us what to expect.
Local businesses such as those in tourism, cosmetics, and duty-free shops have welcomed China's latest move, which lifts a ban on Chinese tour groups. They're expecting sales to recover after being hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic and the drop in the number of tourists from China after restrictions were imposed 6 years ago.
We are expecting sales to improve with more Chinese tourists. We are preparing a variety of joint promotions with tourism businesses and airlines to enhance the shopping convenience for Chinese tourists.
I hope it provides an opportunity, especially for small business owners, to resume their operations.
Individual Chinese tourists have been able to travel to South Korea, but the big deal about the tour groups is how much they spend. Data from the Korea Tourism Organization shows the number of Chinese tourists, which surpassed 8 million in 2016, was reduced by nearly half in 2017 due to the deployment of the U.S. missile defense system. Then the COVID-19 pandemic caused the numbers to plunge further. With Beijing allowing group tours to resume, Seoul's travel deficit is one of the key areas that is expected to see a recovery. The country's travel balance during the first half of this year recorded a $4.65 billion deficit, the biggest deficit for the same period since 2018. There has been a travel deficit for 22 consecutive years up to 2022. And South Korea could reach its 23rd year in the red if this trend continues, so all eyes are now on the Chinese tour groups. However, while an expert says there will be an improvement in South Korea's travel deficit, whether or not there is a return to a surplus remains uncertain as Chinese consumer behavior has changed.
Japan is one of the preferred travel destinations for Chinese tourists. This is due to its proximity, strong preference for Japanese products, and the depreciation of the Japanese yen. As the cost of living in China is low, it is dealing with deflationary concerns, while South Korea is experiencing relatively high inflation.
Meanwhile, after allowing group tours, in just one day on Friday, reservations were made for a total of 53 Chinese cruise ships to visit Jeju, meaning that more Chinese tourists are expected to visit South Korea from now on. 신나영, Arirang News.
In an effort to ease the burden of raising a child, the South Korean government has broadened the scope of what it classes as a multi-child family from 3 or more children to 2 or more. The Education Ministry announced the decision on Wednesday as part of government-wide efforts to tackle the country's low birth rate. With this change, families with 2 or more children will now be able to enjoy a variety of benefits, such as a priority pass in public housing sales, cuts or exemptions in vehicle acquisition taxes, and discounts at government-run museums and theaters. South Korea has been trying to reduce the number of industrial accidents. In 2022, officials implemented the Serious Accident Punishment Act, where supervisors at industrial sites can be held responsible for any casualties that happen due to a lack of safety measures. From next year, though, these safety measures will be enhanced with a touch of AI technology. Yoon explains more.
When the truck driver puts his phone up to his ear, a warning alarm sounds. And when the driver yawns to fight drowsiness, another warning alarm sounds. There's an artificial intelligence device in the vehicle that analyzes the driver's actions and expressions in real time. This device detects situations where safety precautions are needed. For example, forklift drivers may have blind spots, so the device detects people or objects within a 10-meter radius. On construction sites, when the chin straps of safety helmets are loosened, which increases the risk of injury, the supervisor is alerted by their smartphone. This is a technology that has been introduced by a medical waste company as a way of dealing with the enforcement of the Serious Accidents Punishment Act, which has added a greater focus on safety management.
We met with many businesses and workers in person to identify safety risks on site, then focused on making sure it doesn't interfere with their comfort and work efficiency.
On the monitor, when a worker approaches a danger zone, the orange boundary line turns red. The technology automatically measures the distance between the excavator and workers, and when the workers are within a certain radius, a warning label appears on the screen. When flames appear, the system quickly detects a fire. These are all dangerous situations that would have needed to be checked by people in the past. This construction company decided that installing smart CCTVs with AI technology would have a greater effect on preventing serious accidents, and expanded its application throughout all of their working sites.
I think installing a variety of smart safety technologies is what made us the only major construction company to report 0 serious accidents last year.
Also in the works is the development of unmanned heavy equipment to minimize casualties in dangerous areas. A version of this technology was already tested while responding to an apartment collapse incident in Gwangju City last year. As such, with more high-tech integrated technology increasing, the possibility of serious accidents are decreasing in working sites. 이은진, Arirang News.
President Yoon observes a 3-day mourning period for his late father, with condolence visits coming from across the political spectrum. The top office says his diplomatic schedule this week at Camp David won't be affected. Our senior presidential correspondent, Oh Soo-young, tells us more.
State officials and former dignitaries, along with religious leaders, made their way to the funeral hall of President Yoon Suk-yeol's late father, Yoon Gi-jung. The top office on Tuesday said the late Professor Emeritus of Yonsei University had passed away, aged 92, and that President Yoon went to his side after attending the country's National Liberation Day event. The late Yoon Gi-jung taught applied statistics and was a respected figure in academia for his contribution and leadership. His son, the president, has fondly described him in the past as his #1 mentor and a man of principles. While the Yoon family are keeping the funeral a private affair, respectfully declining flowers and condolence visits, except from relatives and close acquaintances, a limited number of state officials and leaders in Korean society, including the religious sector, have paid their respects. This included Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, the leaders of the ruling and opposition parties Kim Ki-yeon and Lee Jae-myung, along with Deputy Prime Minister Lee Joo-ho and other cabinet members. Former President Lee Myung-bak also paid a visit and briefly held talks with President Yoon, as did former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who expressed his condolences and hopes that Yoon's upcoming trilateral meeting at Camp David would go well. A senior presidential official said that the president will observe the traditional 3-day mourning period and return to his duties on the last day to prevent any absence from conducting state affairs. Regarding Yoon's trip to the United States for the meeting at Camp David with his American and Japanese counterparts, the official said the departure time on Thursday may be adjusted, but the date remains unchanged. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now to the deadly wildfires that have devastated the Hawaiian island of Maui. Local authorities there say the death toll as of Tuesday evening local time has reached 106. However, with search and rescue efforts ongoing and the number of unaccounted still being unclear, Hawaii's Governor Josh Green says the number could potentially double or even triple. Authorities have searched through around 1/3 of fire-affected areas, but they're having difficulty identifying the victims as their remains are mostly unrecognizable. So far, only 5 people have been identified. Shifting gears, BTS member Jungkook has set another record for the K-pop industry, topping the Billboard global charts for the 4th consecutive week. Jungkook's debut single 7 remains atop the Billboard Global 200 chart according to data collected from over 200 countries, and also the Billboard Global chart, which excludes the United States. Ahead of Tuesday's chart announcement, Billboard stated that 7 has become the first song to be streamed over 100 million times in 4 weeks since the introduction of the Billboard Global chart in September 2020. South Korea's capital city, Seoul, on Wednesday unveiled its new brand slogan, Seoul, My Soul. The slogan was chosen back in March via a months-long online vote. After that, from May to June, the city government went on to accept design submissions. A panel of experts selected the final design. This is the city's 3rd brand slogan following Hi Seoul in 2002 and I Seoul You in 2015. It'll be prompted through the banners and advertisement on public transport across the city.
Summer-like heat will continue to take over across South Korea. Highs will be staying in the 32-degree mark along with on and off showers, and maximum temperatures will stay in the similar range for the next few days. Extreme heat can lead to dehydration and fatigue, so drink plenty of water and avoid staying outside for too long. Occasional showers are expected for many inland regions tomorrow, so make sure to have your umbrellas handy. For parts of central regions and Jeollado province, 5 to 40 millimeters are expected. Gyeongsang-do province has 5 to 60 millimeters in the forecast. In the meantime, the sun's UV radiation will be intense tomorrow. Most regions will see UV ray index in the high to very high range. Despite cloudy skies and on and off showers, you can still get sunburned. And tomorrow, Seoul and Busan will be starting off at 24 degrees Celsius. Daytime highs will be in the similar range tomorrow. Seoul will peak at 32, Daejeon 31. Gyeonggi will be topping out at 30 degrees. On Friday, inland regions, including here in Seoul, will see scattered outbreaks of rainfall. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for this Wednesday night newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow for the latest news. Good night.